I would have categorized you as a kind of a quite maverick, quite instinctive sales guy who had some fantastic results.
We have today just closed a deal that takes us to $1 million for the quarter. Reps have put scorecards through ChatGPT. How did I do? What should be the next questions? They're not learning, they're not taking those things in. From my perspective, that core set of sales skills will never go away. I really like that phrase, be comfortable being uncomfortable. A leadership role now, the ability to analyse 10, 15 conversations at once, raft of conversations, massively important. At the minute, we are in the GenAI space.
Yeah, hi James, how are you doing?
Hello Richard, good thank you, how are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. So welcome to today's edition of Funnel Vision. Really good for you to join us today. You led a startup at Selden, and then I think you're obviously doing something similar at TrueFoundry, going through a lot of growth at the moment by the sound of it. And you're leading the whole go-to-market.
So I'm the head of go-to-market there. So Selden was a great time for me from a learning perspective. I was employee number 10. I was the first go-to-market person that they really had. But so I was employee number 10. We built the company through to, I had about 22, 23 people in my org at one point.
Right.
So scaled here in Europe. It's a London-based business, still going strong. Built out a go-to-market motion in the US as well. Hired a few people in mainland Europe. And we'd scaled up through Series A through Series B. A 6-figure valuation by HMRC after our Series B raise, which was great. But got to a point where we rebuilt the sales motion from open source to open core. But now, building out so I joined in February to lead the go-to-market. Go-to-market was really founder-led selling. And since then, we've hired 10 or 11 people in the go-to-market organisation. We have today just closed a deal that takes us to $1 million for the quarter. So we've actually tripled the size of the revenue since February, which, given there was no go-to-market team really there, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, excellent.
And we're on course for in these businesses, every quarter needs to be a record quarter. But we're looking at going way through that number and then coming into Q4 next year, looking to try and get us near some point for another raise and those sorts of things. Headcount for about 10, 12 people next year.
Most people I'm speaking to are having issues with time to close, creating compelling events. What is it that you're doing that's
I'd love to say all the secret sauce was down to us. At the minute, we are in the GenAI space. We're very focused on companies that are being able to experiment and build agentic applications or RAG applications, which almost feel like they're obsolete now. But the need to have the GRC, the controls, the audit, the governance around those applications is increasing every day. There's a story every day about such and such leaked IP by asking ChatGPT a question, that kind of stuff. So the compelling event is sometimes difficult to generate because you're selling an insurance policy. What happens if? But it is something that's very high. It's no longer a technology view. This is now at board level. So being able to elevate to the right mobilizers in the deals, again, software G phrase, but not just get to the board. It's trying to find the people that this really matters to. Is the one thing that we've done. The second thing that means is those are the projects that always get budget, because one of the big challenges for us was, we'll take a look at this because it is new, it is cool. We want to try and have it. We'll kick the tires on this. So we were doing lots of proofs of concept, which would become trials, pilots, sometimes unpaid for licenses, etc.
Right. Obviously, from one of the main reasons I wanted to have a discussion with you, and I know you're smiling, I would have categorised you, and this is a compliment, as a kind of a quite maverick, quite instinctive sales guy who had some fantastic results. You mentioned the Alliance deal and the secondary deal, and there was other projects as well. So multi-million, 25 million type deals. You were very instinctive. How do you take that and model it as a leader? How do you make that transition?
You sent me an email saying I was good at not being liked, and I was okay with that.
Yeah.
How do we change that into being a leader? So I think the first thing is that instinctive for sure, which I think makes you look maverick to an extent. Some of the personal behaviours that go around that can sometimes inflame that reputation or vision, shall we say. But I think the one thing that, and just to come back again a little bit to that software AG stuff, is that that's where I got that grounding in how important the team was in closing deals, and because I was getting into sales cycles that I'd never been involved in. 14 million, 20 million. Even in my second year, we ended up dealing with somebody on the board at a very large logistics company, think we'd nailed another 15 million, and it fell apart with 3 weeks of the year to go. But it taught me a lot about how we had to use that team and how we brought the team behind us. But from a salesperson's perspective, you had to be brave enough to go and make those decisions. You had to be brave enough to be getting comfortable being uncomfortable, is a phrase that one of my previous sales leads in the US that I hired for Selden, I really like that phrase, be comfortable being uncomfortable, because if you're living in your comfort zone, oh, the deal's going great, they love the demo, everybody loves the demo. Oh no, the process is do the demo, do the POV, get a contract, oh right, great. But you have to be able to be out there and have the difficult conversations, spend time with people that don't necessarily like you or want you to be in the room, but can you show those people that you can add value to their business?
Yeah.
And I always say to my teams now that, 1, be comfortable being uncomfortable. 2, don't be afraid to push these people, because you are helping them, right? A customer will be the first one to tell you, well, we're going to pay you and you'll have us as a customer. Okay, great, but what is it we're doing for you? And actually, I'm a big believer in constructive tension in deals, and that comes with a certain set of personal characteristics, right? Yeah. You have to be brave and you have to be a bit confident, or, sometimes even a little bit brash and pushy, because you have to be able to believe that what you're doing adds value to that company.
Yeah.
And just to finish on that, the understanding the value you bring and the software brings is key to that, because then you can push and have those conversations.
Yeah. So I think I was about to ask you around the constructive tension and comfortable being uncomfortable. How do you build that? But I guess you've partly answered that with you need to know the value, but is there some other aspects as well?
So the thing that I think has really changed in sales, generally over the last 10 years, related to that constructive tension and the use of information. One of my favourite salespeople that we used to work with to describe themselves as a dot joiner. Can you join all the dots in a process? And if you're going to build constructive tension, you have to have that full picture understanding. It's not just about the value. It's like, why does Richard care about this deal? Why does Richard's boss care about the deal? Why do the 5 people that report to Richard care about this deal? And building that whole picture. And rather than working in a linear fashion, I've completed the metric stage. I know who the economic buyer is. Being able to go back round and constantly validate that information with people. You tell me something, so I'll go and tell your boss. If your boss tells me something different, I'm going to come back and tell you again. Yeah. Because what that creates is you'll either look like a troublemaker, but they'll go and talk about you anyway, or you're adding value because you're learning something you didn't know, or your boss is learning something you didn't know, and you create a kind of a groundswell. I quite often refer to my teams of, people just start talking about who we are and why we're there and what's happening. I mean, you don't need to go as far as I once got asked to leave the Alliance Healthcare office where I had a desk because I was walking around like I owned the place. Shock. So I had to but try and create this groundswell of activity around you and your business.
Yeah.
And you do that by understanding that information, assimilating it, and moving it around. I think one of the things that we're all guilty of these days is people trying to get to shorter sales cycles. Everyone's got an AI system to help you do something that you'd normally do as a salesperson, and there isn't always a silver bullet. Right, and sometimes you can't do things as quickly as you'd like, but understanding that importance of the human relationship within that process of, you tell me something, I'm going to go and tell you, or if he tells me something, I'm going to go and tell 5 other people. Yeah, because that's how you start to find the people that really care about your deals, and the ones that care and have personal commitment to those are really what helps you drive your deal forward.
From your perspective, from when you were selling to when now you're leading, I think it's been like the biggest change. Obviously, we've had COVID. Sales operations are quite different now to selling when we were doing it 8-10 years ago. Yeah.
What I've found the personal transition's a difficult one, because you go from being one of the team to leading the team. And I'd previously tried that in a previous job before Software AG, and it was horrible. You go from one of the team to leading the team, and it was a disaster. You have to be able to, you're part of that Maverick, not lone wolf, but a lot of people are describing that Maverick type personality. You have to get rid of a lot of that, right? Because people don't want to see that in a leader. And you have to be able to elevate yourself and give yourself the gravitas amongst the team, and then be able to go into customers and behave in a very different way. And that was a big learning curve, because there was no point in me going in being another salesperson. You had to go in and learn your role in that and what you were doing. And then I think my biggest challenge was, having been, I think it's fair to say, pretty successful. Some of those big deals that I did, that isn't the only way to sell. Because obviously, as an individual contributor, you very rarely see other salespeople in their meetings. You don't know how they behave. You don't know the skills that they bring. And Software AG, sorry to keep going back to it, but was, it was a very clear culture that we had. It was what they wanted to achieve as a culture in terms of the types of people that they hired.
Yeah.
So that was always very front foot, very aggressive, very outgoing, etc. And obviously, having seen great success and frankly earned quite good money there, I felt that was the right thing to do moving forward. And of course, over the last 15 years, that type of approach definitely probably isn't everyone's preferred now. So that's been a challenge as well, just understanding different styles, and accepting that some are different and do work, but also being brave enough to say that does not work. Whether the world thinks that's an acceptable behaviour now or whatever it might be, that isn't going to be successful for really high-end enterprise selling.
You mentioned about MEDDPICC and the qualification side of things. I'd have said that and coaching as well, obviously being key, I'd have said you would have always listened and you would have taken things on board, but you would probably be a bit naturally resistant to that.
Yeah.
So how do you sort of make sure that MEDDPICC, for instance, is embedded with your sales team and not resistant, not a tick box, and actually intrinsic?
So we built the playbook based on relatively standard, MEDDPICC scenarios. We spend a lot of time, myself and the founding team, reworking that every quarter, probably twice a quarter. Does it match our process? In fact, the CEO at Selden, James, a little shout out for you, Mr. Perry, was really keen on that we iterated on that very regularly. What have we learned from this quarter and how has it changed? Because you're right, otherwise it becomes a tick box. Do you understand the metrics? Yes, tick. Do you understand this? And actually, some of the tooling we use is now very good at going that next level down of what are the metrics? How do you understand those? And that's why I think the MEDDPICC and the Challenger are great, because MEDDPICC can become a bit checkboxy. Challenger really weaves itself around each of those stages and is looking at how you drive the process. And it comes back to my point of nothing's ever linear. Come back, revisit something, requalify, re-ask the questions, go back and revisit. So
challenge somebody else.
Challenge somebody else in the org. Would you learn something new? And again, Mike would, if you go into a meeting and you not learn something new, it's a wasted meeting. If you don't learn something new about your deal, good or bad, what was the point of the meeting? And if you send an email and it doesn't move the deal in some way, good or bad, what was the point in the email? So really trying to drive into not just do this because it's a checkbox and it works. We've all earned loads of money doing it, but trying to show real life examples of how that does. And of course, spend some time on the coaching moments where things don't go as well. But one of the things that we try and focus on, and I got this from Sir Clive Woodward a long time ago, a long time in his book. He says everyone always does a post-mortem. Why did that die? Why didn't that go very well? But he really flipped the mentality of the team of why did we win? What were the things that we did really well? And actually spending time looking at those is important, because that's really what other people want to learn from. Nobody wants to say, oh yeah, I fell down that hole as well. It's about, trying to move these things. And I think in the smaller companies where I've sort of found myself at home, is also letting people understand these are industry standard practices, right? These are not just things that a guy who worked at SAP once thinks is a good idea. And I was having a real problem at Selden for a while with some of the salespeople just wouldn't adopt it, wouldn't do it, this, that and the other. And, I was looking at it, these were the right people, they had the right characteristics and this, that and the other. And I spoke to another of my old bosses from SAP and Oracle, and I was like, what do I do? And I still use a lot of my mentors. They need to understand that this isn't new, that this is actually everybody in the world uses these types of things. And actually, once we started to prove it that way, and I got Mike in to come and be my speaker at my sales kickoff, I had some of my other old bosses. Sorry, you didn't get the call, that one. I had some of my old bosses, just spend some time with the team. They had to start to understand that these things are important and why they're relevant, versus just being told this is another process that you have to fill out. Which
Okay, and you mentioned Mike there, so we both worked with Mike a few times. We know him well. He's previously been on the podcast. I think you referenced you learnt a lot from him and he challenged you a lot. What are like the top 2 or 3 things that you learned that you now
and I'll take forward? Mike? Yeah, the number one was always if you do something and it doesn't move the deal, then it was pointless. That was the thing that he was always very clear about, and I take that with all of my team. If you're going to send a text message to somebody, it needs to move the deal. If you don't go, and another one of his, it'll be 2 or 3 if that's right. One of the ones, before you make a phone call, before you send a text, before you send an email, this, that, and the other, go and look at the scorecard, understand what you need to move, and make sure that makes an impact. If every interaction is meaningful, that's when your personality traits, it makes it so much easier to challenge, because you understand where you're trying to get to. versus, oh, well, they love the demo, so I send the follow-up saying, what did they like, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So can you, does it move, every interaction must move the needle.
Purpose,
Yeah, have a real purpose. He was always a big proponent of go back and validate, revalidate, and go across people.
Yep.
And then the one question that still exists, they don't have it in the new system for their scorecard anymore, but the one question, what can stop the deal happening?
Oh, right, yeah.
He would ask you that every single time, every single day.
Yep.
And, it would be, if you didn't have the answer, he was very clear with you that you probably should have that answer. And you go away and find it out.
Okay.
And then, the fourth thing that was around, again, the process, make everything specific. Ask Richard on Tuesday about such and such, because as salespeople or sales professionals, we get a lot of time we feel we're instinctive with these things, or we feel we've answered that question and we can move on. But by making your actions really specific, and it sounds a little bit 101 really, but a lot of these are very core skills that you need to try and take forward. But always be specific around your actions and be time bound, because it's really easy to not ask a difficult question. I'll ask that in a couple of weeks, or I sort of asked that. So being really, really nailed down onto that detail. And then the last one, which there was a number of times where it wasn't always the highest between he and I, or generally, always try and keep the mood music high. Always try and keep everybody on a positive footing. Even if you're asking difficult questions, even if you're being challenging, always try and keep the mood music high and be positive on the front foot, because to challenge people can sometimes you have to feel like you're quite negative. And my approach as a bigger guy and a bit more aggressive and a bit more confident in himself, sometimes you could go too far with that and you're being actually quite negative to the deal, or people are like, this guy just thinks he knows better than you, etc. If you're able to keep the mood music high, it means you can keep on the front foot. If you can ask questions and you watch somebody shift around in their chair a bit, you're like, I've got the right question here, but you don't have to then go and nail the person. Oh, you didn't know the answer and everything else. So that would be the 4 or 5 takeaways.
So keep some humour and
absolutely. And
well,
as we talked about before we came in, I've got pictures of me with the global VP of architecture in Vegas having a good time. And I'm not saying take everyone to Vegas, but keep the human relationship in it. Like, don't become a relationship seller. You're not their best friend. You don't have to be their mate, but you need to keep the humility in it for sure.
Okay, I mean, just on that very point, Objective Management Group does a really good assessment of salespeople, top sales skills, and actually the one behaviour that is sort of absolute key to top performers is the not need to be liked button.
Yep.
And I think that's something that in some ways I remember thinking you had that in kind of abundance.
There's not many people
but
like
you
me.
also you also were able to build super strong relationships as well. So there's a slight conflict there. Can you just explain a bit more about that, the need and what you actually do with relationships? Because you do build proper long-term human relationships as well.
So the need not to be liked. I talked about be constructively tough-minded, right? It's okay that these people, I am able to offer them a material change to their business and do things differently. Like, we created a business case for the world's 4th largest motor company when I was at my previous business. And that business case showed that we could get them a machine learning model into production 89% faster, right? Now, if first thing, they did the usual, but we don't believe that, we were able to prove it out. If you can move the needle that significantly for a company of that size, you're talking hundreds of millions of value, right? So actually, be prepared, and this is again the challenger thing, be prepared that these people will not like some of the things that you say, because really you're trying to show them that their business is broken in a way. And you have to have that belief, right? And, in life, whether that's in work or out of work, people don't like to be told that they're wrong. Well, people very rarely like to be told that they're wrong. People find that quite a difficult conversation to have. But you must be able to back it up with, this is the reason that it's wrong, and I can show you a different way, right? I also always used to say, when I met my new customers for the existing users that I had, a lot of time people don't like me because I'll never say yes to everything. And I think as a rep, a lot of the time, or a lot of reps that I've seen and not hired, are people pleasers. They want, if they like me, they'll buy. If we tell them what they want to hear, they'll buy. And then you get into the realms of, well, are you actually lying to that person because you can't deliver what you said, etc. So you don't have to be a people pleaser. It's okay to say no. And I always used to say, you won't always get a yes, but if it's a no, we'll then figure out a way how we get to the yes. And actually building that personal relationship with them of like, okay, now we've both got a problem.
Yeah.
You know, because the ownership of the problem is key. It's never
Still got that problem.
It's never
from
my
a customer
problem.
perspective.
It's never my
Yeah.
problem, right? It's not my problem that they can't get that software. It's not my problem that their supply chain is broken. It's something that I can help them fix it, but never take ownership of the problem. Always keep that really firmly on their side of the table. Which again, sometimes does he really want to help, or is he just in it for himself? But if the customer doesn't continue to own the problem, that's a real challenge as well. And then the flip side of that, I've been lucky enough, you know, both within the team and within teams and outside of teams, I've built some long-lasting friendships and some, you know, long-lasting mentor relationships. And I still go back to a lot of the people that we've already talked about today, asking for help and advice, because I've been lucky enough that we can build that personal relationship. But from a rep to a buyer situation, or from sales leader to wherever you come in, you have to make sure that you understand the boundaries. And as a much younger rep, over familiarity would creep in, and sometimes you'd leave that thing, you're like, I've made a real dick of myself today. You know, those people do not behave in that way. That's not what they are. So just understanding where those boundaries lie and keeping it, trying to keep it professional. As I said, I've got some great personal friendships with these people, but you know, never be assumptive about their buy into you. Make sure you get it right in that first.
Do you think that you actually do have a need to be liked, but understand that you don't need to from a sales perspective? Is that the difference?
I think so. I think that's probably the difference. I mean, everybody likes to be liked. You know, but when you sometimes have my personality traits, it's okay to understand that you're not everybody's cup of tea. That's cool, right? And nobody's friends with everybody. But in that business situation, like, you are not there to be their friend, right? Yeah. If they get on with you, great. And I find it. I always used to joke. There are two types of chief architects. One who think people like me and you are the coolest people in the world, and they really wish they were like us. The second,
not many of those, though, is there?
Well, you'll be surprised. But if you find the right ones, they tend to buy big. Yeah. The second group is, who's this idiot, right? Because you know, if you look at the people that buy from us and us, personality traits are chalk and cheese, right? They're just complete opposite ends. So you can't just go in on that personality. You have to try and then find that common ground. But all of that, and I coach my teams really heavily on this, is that if you truly understand why somebody is looking to buy, it makes it much easier to form those relationships. So I talk a lot about my Columbo routine. I'm showing my age a little bit. Columbo, the TV detective.
I vaguely remember.
Probably just your time. What did he do? He spent 45 minutes bumbling around, asking stupid questions. Everybody thought he had no idea what he was doing. Last 10 minutes, pam, he's got the murderer, he's got the weapon, he's got the date, the time, and everything else, right? And nobody felt under pressure from him. Nobody felt like they were investigating. The murderer felt like he was hoodwinking them. I always say, I make every single one of my new reps go and watch Columbo, one episode. Right. You know, even though it's old and grainy and you won't like it because you're in your 20s. But look at how he goes about that, and he never stops asking questions. And what he understands then is people's personal motivations. And that's when it's easier to become liked, because that person feels like you've got a genuine interest in them. Yeah. You know, and if that then moves into, how did little Johnny get on his soccer game on a Monday or whatever, then great. But if you genuinely take that time to get to know the person and their personal motivators, you only do that by really understanding what's the business trying to achieve and why he's been asked to deliver that project, and just continually ask those questions. Just always ask, you know, because 9 times out of 10, no matter how junior they are in a business, they will know more about their company than we do, right?
Of course,
And you can go away and you can read the 10K or the financial reports or whatever it might be, and I've seen it with reps who go, oh, I read your report and I know these are your top 5 initiatives. People just switch off immediately, just not interested. Yeah. So the Columbo routine, tell me, 3 key questions. Tell me about your business, tell me about your role in it, and tell me why we're talking today. And from there, just ask questions. Yeah. And really get underneath why these things are happening, because you will never know all of the answers. And then, back to what I said earlier, as you find those answers out, go back, revalidate it, re-ask, and so on.
Okay. I'm just changing tack slightly, because obviously one of the core themes around the podcast is around AI, its adoption in sales particularly. So you're living in an AI world, selling to sort of technical communities. How have you seen AI support you and your sales team?
Yeah, so
if at all.
I mean, well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I'm a firm believer that there are many things that AI should never replace in a salesperson. Because of that, you know, I couldn't send my bot today because it was raining at home, so you got me in person. I've had personal experiences where reps have put scorecards through ChatGPT. How did I do? What should be the next questions, etc., etc. Then they don't ask those questions, and they put the thing back in, and they go back through. And actually, they're not learning. They're not taking those things in. You're not ingesting the information. You're not assimilating and using that information. So, from my perspective, that core set of sales skills will never go away because, well, for this decade anyway, who knows what happens in 10 years' time? But the tech cannot understand the sentiment. It can't build those relationships and those sorts of things. So there's the using AI for shortcuts, which I don't think is a great idea. There is using AI for proficiency and making things smoother. The ability to analyze, for me personally, at a leadership role now, the ability to analyze 10, 15 conversations at once, pick out what our common themes are, where are the common objections, building better playbooks based on a whole raft of conversations, massively important. I spent 5 hours on my flight the other day pumping in every single proposal we've ever generated for a new proposition that we're trying to build and understanding how we were actually pricing it and how we were discounting it in different situations based on different objections. The ability to pull all of that together really quickly is invaluable, right? Because otherwise that's a really manual process. So I think as long as you're not trying to find a silver bullet, I think you're in a good spot. We've looked a lot at, as I said, our customers build agentic applications. We've looked at agent SDRs and those sorts of things. Again, I'm not a huge believer in the replacing of a human with a system. We'll call it a robot because that's what people call them. And actually, when you take a deeper dive into some of these solutions, what they really are is automated email campaigns and those sorts of things. Which again, if you're creating operational efficiency with those things, I'm all for that. That's fine. And the more people that build those apps, the more people that TrueFoundry can power. So that's my dichotomy in this. But I think as long as people are using AI to enhance the human versus try and find a way to replace them, then I think it will be successful. As I said, in 10, 15 years' time, Rich, you and I may actually finally be obsolete. Who knows? Yeah. But hopefully both retired and won't worry about it. But
okay. Yeah. And from your tooling up your sales guys and girls, what are you giving them? You mentioned Salesforce. I mean, obviously used to include like Sales Navigator, I guess. Still that. Is there any other sort of tools and tech?
There's so many tools that I have no idea about these days.
Yeah.
So, which is why the RevOps function is so important for me in terms of the last two businesses. So Salesforce remains the heart of everything that we do. As I said, I much enjoy it now from an MI perspective versus updating it. So to all the reps out there, I get it, but tough. Then we have the LinkedIn side of things from a lead generation, Sales Navigator, all that kind of stuff. Then the outreach, Sales Loft type applications or email automation and so on and so forth. We are fighting a continual internal battle over a dialer. Do we need a dialer? Do we not? I still believe that I don't think that necessarily helps people make more calls. That's more about the person and are they prepared to make them. But I understand that the technological advances that makes. I'm a big fan of the sixth sense demand-based type applications. The profiling, who's been on your website, what have they been looking at, how long were they looking at it for? Intent signals. There was an article a while ago that one of them was just making it up. I don't know. I'm unsure. But generally, even if it's just lead forensics, which is a real, I'm not doing a plug,
I've used that to be
but very high value, very good, very, very well priced solution of just, because when you want to go and talk to that person, again, it's not, I've seen you looking at page 4 on the website for 27 minutes. You start to form a picture of what this person's motivators might be, what they're understanding. Again, the use of AI from, can I do my research before I call a person or a company? Here's their last 3 years annual reports. Here's go and find out if there's been a breach in their AI, etc., and then using AI for that type of research perspective. I really push, and it will give you, if you really want, it'll tell you how to then go and make the call and those sorts of things. That's where I like to see the human being come in and make those sorts of decisions. But I don't mind if you want a prompter for 10, ask ChatGPT and it'll probably give you 4 or 5 decent questions. So they're the main things that we use. The Sales Loft outreach type stuff remains alien to me because I never had that as a rep. Those solutions didn't exist as a rep. So that's where my RevOps guy is super important to me to make sure that we get the right things in that space. But then bringing all of that together from an information perspective, again, is where we really see the value of the GenAI, I think, and the management information that you're now able to produce, the decisions that you can make, and the predictions of how you can change processes and people and moving forward is super important.
Okay, so I mean, obviously you have a strong RevOps team, but you're using tech, whether it's AI or tech full stop, to help with the outreach, the profiling, the intent, etc. You definitely would love Curvo, to be fair, because as a seller, it does all your notes for you straight into Salesforce. You wouldn't have to.
We use Fireflies for that. You're right. Okay. I do like those.
Okay, you would like you have MEDDPICC scorecards and stuff like that on top, so it goes a little bit further than Fireflies.
All right, Richard. I'll do it. If you take enough interest in me as a human being, I'll let you do a demo.
Try. It's a bit difficult with people watching. Yeah, no, that's cool. All right, James, thank you. And I've got a few, just more sort of general, like bigger questions that I'd like to ask kind of generally at the end of the discussion. So I think you have probably hinted already, but is the Walgreens Boots Alliance, is that your favourite deal, or is there a different deal that's your favourite deal of all time?
I think it has to be up there. I share a few thoughts as to why. So the Walgreens Boots Alliance group, everybody knows who Walgreens and Boots are. I know people know who Alliance Healthcare is. That's the, I think they've sold it now, the wholesale distribution business that they had. And we'd just come off the back of it was their largest ever IT spend. It was the biggest deal in Software AG's history from a license perspective. I think it was bigger than the UK turnover, that deal. And then when you joined, we were working on the transition to the Walgreens deal, which, I spent a lot of time in Chicago, made some great friends. And let's be frank, I earned pretty decent money off the back of that as well, and was a great grounding for my skill set that I try and take forward now when I build and lead and coach teams and all that kind of good stuff. Was it my favourite? I said at the time, as we closed this other deal that I mentioned earlier, the motor manufacturer.
Oh yeah.
So my first ever meeting for Selden, as I joined full time, was in the Valley at this motor company's innovation centre. I won't say which one because I don't think I'm allowed. In walk 5 data scientists. You can tell which ones they are: dirty shirts, glasses. No offence. And then the guy comes and sits at the back in chinos and a shirt and everything else. And I was, well, who are you? And he said, I'm Steve such and such. Again, I'm one of the 4 CIOs. And I was like, oh. And I remember texting my wife and said, I've been at SAP and I've been at Oracle, and we couldn't get to these people. And we were at the time were 11, 12 people in London, and this guy had turned up to this meeting. And my rep at the end of it, the guy who had sold the films, was like really pushing, what's the next steps, what we're going to do, what we do. And this guy just stood up and he said, I'll promise you this, we'll go away and we'll download the open source version. We will start to work on it, and then we will tell you how we want you to help moving forward. And I'm like, he went to ask another question, push back. I'm like, we're good here. They came back and said they wanted to do a proof of concept. I, of course, told them we had hundreds of thousands of users, because we did. They paid us 100,000 to do the proof of concept, but it was only on the proviso, because I said about paid POCs. It was only on the proviso. They allowed us to build a business case that we could then benchmark and use moving forward. So they paid us $100,000 to prove that the software worked. We got the business case out of it that said that we were 88% more productive at putting machine learning models into production than 2 other mega vendors at the time. We're still mega vendors now. And we closed that deal. It was a 2-year, $500,000 a year deal, so it was $1 million deal. But that was 2 days before Valentine's Day. We were 17, 18 people at that point. We tripled the size of the company overnight.
In terms of scale?
In terms of scale of the business, we tripled the size of the company overnight. They are renowned as being one of the hardest companies to sell to in any type of software situation still. There's no prizes if anybody does guess who it is. So I think that was one of my proudest deals, just based on what we were able to achieve. Okay. And the way that everybody loves to get a big deal, but the fact that we had that tool, which is still used today as the benchmarks for how good the Selden technology was for getting. I think that one's probably up there as well.
Okay. But that sounds that's a really good story, especially tripling the business turnover in one deal is cool, and the paid proof of concept at that point. So there's a couple of things for people perhaps to have a little think about. You mentioned about Columbo, but if you were to give like one tip to somebody new that's coming into the profession, what would that be outside of watching an episode? Outside of
watching Columbo. So I try and focus on 3 key things of how I run my professional life: earn, learn, have fun. Right? I think you do need to be money motivated. You need to be open to learning. But if it isn't fun, don't do it. But the number one thing I look for, the number one thing I say to everybody, you've got to be prepared to work hard. And it sounds really obvious. Work hard and be honest, because you have to be honest with you. Sorry, you asked one thing. I've given you 4 already. But
5, I think.
5 things. Sorry. But be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
In your sales processes, in your relationship with your colleagues, in your relationships with the external people and everything else, be honest. Be prepared to say that I've not done that right or I've got this wrong. As I said to you in our little pre-chat before we started, if we get something wrong as a sales professional, nobody dies. We are not that important.
Yeah.
Okay, it is not brain surgery, but if the number one thing is be able to be honest with yourself, with your colleagues, and with your prospects. Because coming back to that, it's really easy to be liked if you say yes to everything.
Yeah.
But if you can't deliver that, you're going to create yourself a problem further down the line. So that would be the number one thing I would say to people if they're coming into this profession. But maybe it's all professions, I don't know. But be honest with yourself and the people around you. Otherwise, you just create problems for yourselves down the line.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very fair. So how would you just keep yourself honest and challenge yourself? Is there something?
Yeah. So from a sales perspective, there's always the challenger methodology and picking the tools that we use there. I think always try and find strong mentors that are brave enough to stand up to you, because again, being quite a big bold character, sometimes people find it quite difficult to challenge you and be honest with you. I'm lucky enough that I work with a guy that I've known from Selden and a business before, who has no problem picking me apart at pace and with great aggression, which sometimes is what I need in terms of that level of direct, honest feedback. So be prepared. I always go and make sure that I validate my thinking, not tell me I'm great because this is a brilliant idea, but this is where my head's at. This is why I think it's good or bad. What do you think? And be able to have those. Always take those external mentors. And we talked about the ex-software AG people. I'm proud, to be honest, and I feel very humble and lucky that I'm able to call on some of those people that still offer help and advice today.
Okay, cool. And so just in terms of that, testing things internally and keeping yourself honest, it's a bit like the prospect scenario, isn't it? It's
100%.
ask other people's opinion, keep doing that, but in a different way.
Absolutely, yeah, and be big enough and brave enough to understand the feedback may not always be positive. Yeah.
You mentioned about the software AG and some of the leaders we had at that time. Is there a particular sort of catchphrase or question you find yourself thinking, oh God, I sound like...
I sound like him, yeah. I've got a list of about 10. This one time I was like, why the f*** you procrastinated? Procrastination kills deals. Yeah. And, we used to, why ask the question next Tuesday? Can you not ring in when you get out of this meeting? Because again, I talked about people not being comfortable, being uncomfortable, or I don't really want to ask that question because I don't think he knows the answer and I don't know the answer and those kind of things. And you sit and you procrastinate. Yeah. And procrastination... You were right, does kill deals.
Okay. All right. And do you smile when you say that?
I do, yeah, I do all the time. And as I said, I'm fortunate enough that some of the reps that I've hired and mentored and led at companies have gone on to their own leadership roles now. Yeah. Sometimes I get the text that I sound like you, I've just said, the mood music's one that comes up quite a lot. I've just said, keep the mood music high. And so I now sound like you. I'm like, well, you don't. You actually sound like Mike. But
yeah.
But yeah, that's the procrastination one. And it always makes me chuckle.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for coming on today, James. Been real joy. If anyone wants to get hold of you, I'm sure there's people in the maybe early stages of their career thinking, I could do with some
100%.
mentor and so on. I'm sure you'd be brilliant for that and would enjoy it as well. But how do people get in touch with you?
So I'm old-fashioned. My telephone number is actually on my LinkedIn profile.
Right.
So if you are a recruiter and said you've tried really hard to get hold of me, I know you haven't, because my telephone number's on there. Otherwise, my email, james.tovey@truefoundry.com or james.tovey@hotmail.com.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Really appreciate it, Rich. Thanks.